Hello, everybody. I'm Will.
And I'm Kristen.
And this is So I'm Watching American Horror Stories, Season 2, Episode 5.
Bloody Mary.
Bloody Mary.
What?
You say it a third time.
No, I won't. I refuse.
So, okay, two points starting off. Much like with Episode 3, Bloody Mary traumatized me.
No, yeah, I don't care.
child.
I don't care for it. I've never done it. I will never do it. You are asking for shit from the mirror dimension.
You're like, I saw the episode.
I saw the episode. I've seen the Bloody Mary episode of like
Supernatural.
every Supernatural
I've seen
TV
Magicians.
show. Well, I won't do it.
No, I was like in first grade. I was like 6, and a friend told me, and it was like, there's different versions, obviously, but it was, the version I heard was, it was like a bride, and she died, and then whoever killed her, like,
Now she menaces young children.
no, it was something about, because of course my 6-year-old mind made it work, but it was something about like her corpse being at the wedding, and they didn't know she was dead until they lifted the veil, and my mind, I shat myself. Like, and it was that time where it was like, when I was really young, just the notion that like something bad could happen to women or women could be bad, like really rattled. Like I read the like ghost story about the pirate queen Annie, and I couldn't.
You really didn't like the one with the lady with the green ribbon around her neck.
Couldn't handle it. And that was one of the reasons where for quite a while, like I was probably 10 or 11 by the time I was able to go on Disney's Haunted Mansion because of The Bride in the Attic. And she was a lot scarier in the 90s than she is now.
She's just a Black Widow.
Yeah. I'm fine with that now. But, and then second of all, I am a skosh less angry at last week's episode because I think I understand what they're doing now. Ryan Murphy did this like big poll last summer as to what the theme was going to be, and I thought it was for a season of American Horror Story, and apparently it was for this because the top 4 were like Plague, Bloody Mary, Sirens, and I forget what the fourth one was. And so I think we did Plague and Bloody Mary. And so I think we're getting Sirens. Okay. And then whatever this fourth one is next. And I'm sad that it's not going to be a full season of Sirens. Yeah. Because he was doing the thing where he talks trash, or he like talks about like the show and like makes you like a ton of promises that are never going to.
Of course.
Because he said something to Sarah Paulson was like, I don't know, I'm not that good of a swimmer. And he was like, you can train. We need a mermaid queen. And it was like, you know,
asshole.
But and then we had Red Tide, which that should have been mermaids. Tell me I'm wrong.
No, you are correct. You are right. Like you are absolutely right.
So, getting to Bloody Mary, I kind of loved this.
I loved this episode.
Did you? Okay.
I really did. I was compelled the whole time. It was such a cool spin on Bloody Mary. It didn't trip over its own ass the entire time. There were a couple moments where I was like, that's a little, like the historian at the museum was like very exposition heavy, but I honestly didn't care. I just had a really great time, and I loved the twist at the end. I thought it was earned. I thought it was worth it. Both twists, I guess.
Well, I was going to say there was like 4 points, maybe even 5 points in this episode where I was like, I don't like this. And then they like explained it, and I was like, oh, you know what? That's actually pretty good. Yeah. I will say, so it was, I think exactly as it was, I think it was just like a fine episode of television. It was a middle chapter of an anthology show. Sure. I think that if you gave the script a passover, maybe about 30 more minutes and at least 3, if not 4 more characters, I think it would have been an excellent feature.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I think this had...
You can make a Bloody Mary movie. Why not?
think that this take and this story was worthy of feature. And again, in order to do that, you would have needed to do a pass on it. Sure. But there were like 3 different twists that I just genuinely did not see coming. Yeah. And the thing is, I was so intrigued from the get-go because of the angle. I've genuinely never seen Bloody Mary depicted this way.
No, and it was incredible.
and both it felt like Bloody Mary, but also like something I hadn't seen, and I think that's an accomplishment, because that's another thing is,
and Dominique Jackson was the perfect choice.
She was in American God season 3. She takes over for World. She's Miss World.
Oh, wow. What a literally lateral move from Crispin Glover. Incredible. I love it.
And so she kind of does, I get the sense that she does this one thing, but I think she's really good at it.
If that's the one thing you do, fucking do it.
But just from the moment we saw her, I was like, oh, somebody was being creative.
Yeah.
I loved the red. I loved that she wasn't in white. I love the hair, the jewelry, the
gold.
eyes, because, and that's the thing is, it's like, maybe it's from a place of being traumatized by it, but I never fully understood or was given a point. What is the point
like
of
an
Bloody?
explanation?
Yeah. Like what does she want?
Why is she doing it?
Why do we do it? You know what I mean? And this gave like it a thing. Mm-hmm. But this gave it a point where it's like it gave you a reason to risk doing it.
Yeah.
Also, I was going to say I technically have done it, and it's because I was when I say traumatized, I'm not being cute. Like paralyzed with fear. Like my parents, like catatonic. They had to pick me up and take me into the bathroom and do it to show me it couldn't happen.
Okay.
And it was. And I like hid from mirrors for like 2 years after that. I took my mirrors down, like,
wow.
But
well, I think when you were talking about like it gives you a reason, it's like because she can make all of your like wishes come true if you like do something for her. I thought that was really interesting. I also loved the origin of her. Like
but that's one of the places I was mad is I was like, well. Until we got to it.
Okay. At
the halfway point, I was like, well, I hate this. I was like, so she's like a victim of like, because Dominique Jackson was in the flashback. Yeah. I was like, so she's a victim of this horrible like slave trade. And so now she like punishes.
Discount
like,
Ann Dowd. I thought it was Ann Dowd until I saw her moving.
But I like hated that. And then they like explained why. And it was way more thoughtful than it needed to be and could have been. Yeah. And this is again where I think if it had a little bit more time and a little bit more budget, I think it could have landed in a way where this just sort of showed its work. I didn't feel the emotional punch of it. That's fair. And so I think if it was given more, then we could really feel it. Yeah. I do have a question because I loved so much when it opened up and it was these 4 beautiful black girls. Yeah. And it's something that I'm very passionate about, and I sort of like want to talk about it, but I don't always know that I'm the person to talk about it or that I'm qualified. And so it's something that I know is real. Is like I think it's fascinating that we're starting to see so much more diversity in genre, in horror, in fantasy specifically, because fantasy has been overwhelmingly like dominated by whiteness and a lily whiteness. And I know that there are so many people, and even specifically black girls and women, who love fantasy and don't ever get to see
genre stuff, nerdy stuff. It's just like,
because our friends Monique and Tiffany had the podcast Black Girls Do Stuff too, and so I was curious if what you thought about it, how you felt about it, and also specifically how so frequently it always somehow comes back to slavery. Is that like a bad thing? So how do you feel about that? I'm curious.
Yeah. Are you asking me or are you asking the audience?
Both.
Because for me, because
I kind of rolled my eyes at first. I was like, seriously?
Sure. I understand, especially the white boomers' instinct to make it all go back to slavery. At the same time, I think it worked here because there had to be an origin point to it. But if it hadn't shown its work, I would have been like, that's just kind of gross and exploitative. But I think I think it worked here.
Well, and it reminds me of one of
I'm
my
willing to be wrong about that.
one of my in my mind, one of my pseudo mentors, like people that I look up to, is Aisha Tyler.
Yeah.
And I've like read her book, and I like watched the talk when she was on it, and I've watched all of her specials and stuff. And when the TV show Who Do You Think You Are came onto the talk, they basically were asking the women to do the show.
Yeah.
And at first she was like, I don't want to really do that. She was like, I'm a black woman in America. I know my story.
Yeah.
And they sort of were like, do you though?
Yeah. Are you 100%? Like, how sure are you?
And so it was what she thought, but she was very sort of like taken by what the details in the story.
Yeah.
And like the stuff.
I think that's something that like all people, not distinguished by race or anything, I think all people have a tendency to forget that, you know, you only normally ever really know your grandparents, but it's like you have everyone that lived in order to make you was a person. They like did people stuff. They ate and they slept and they pooped and they like went to work and they did people stuff. And I think that's like a really, the way that humans are wired to be relatively self-centered in order to not be, you know, broken down by the weight of mortality. You kind of have to forget stuff like that. And so I think even though, yes, you as a black woman know your story in America, it doesn't mean you know the people. Like there still are human people that
each had their own,
that there might be in like decent amount of information about, which is like interesting.
So yeah, that was just, I was curious how, if that applies to you, how you feel about it in general and how you felt about it here. Because I agree that I think overall they did end up sort of like, certainly,
they wrangled it appropriately.
justifying earning.
For sure. And I agree with you. I loved, because it also, the school that they went to was overwhelmingly black. I didn't specifically notice any like white kids or anything. There really was like the historian at the museum and then the like horrible woman in the flashback. And that was like all of the white characters. So I also really liked that it was these 4 young black girls in like also varying degrees of like being well off, like their families being well off or whatever. I just thought it was really cool.
And I maybe it's because of the relatively low bar of American Horror Stories.
Sure, that could also be it.
I didn't see the twists coming.
No, okay.
But the funny part is it struck me as weird. Like when the second one was it
I think
Lena? No, Lena was the first one.
I think Maggie was the second one, yeah.
When they found Maggie's body and Bianca, it was Quvenzhané Wallis, and she was like, the day's not over yet. Like, how can she be dead? And I was like, yeah, that feels like...
Yeah.
It felt...
That's the thing is, like, once you get to the twist, you're like, oh, they did lay all this groundwork. Because even right after they're done, Elise, the sister, is like... looking straight at Bianca and is like, but I could never do that. And I was like, well, it told her to kill her sister for sure. So,
well, because I remembered that we didn't hear what her bargain was, and I had a hunch that it had to do with her sister, but it still sort of blindsided me when it actually happened. Yeah. And I loved all of the mirrors, and it had sort of like a Blair Witch quality to the Bloody Mary, and especially when they were like chasing and she was like sort of going between, and I liked the effect of the mirror cracking and like the blood dripping. I was just really sort of into it. I thought it was like it was a really very solid sort of Goosebumps Tales from the Dark.
It was really one of the more creative ones in my opinion, and I think it was it was
the fantasy. Yeah. Like I very frequently end up responding because that's what I didn't like about last week is that it was just gross.
It also did manage to really hit on some legit high school shit. Because the one girl was supposed to like leak nudes of her ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend, and then they found a sex tape, and then she like still couldn't do it. And then the other girl was a cheerleader, and she was supposed to drop a girl, and she would be paralyzed, and she didn't do it. But I was like, good lord! And then the girl was a real
bitch.
I was but like, that made maybe it more, you deserve it.
But I'm saying that made it more interesting in the limited amount of time because it's like, well, are we going to feel bad about it? And so,
I just don't know how you could knowingly do something like that. Like, accidents happen, obviously, but like purposefully like letting her get it, I could never.
And I was going to say up to and including the final twist, which was because when Bianca killed her sister, which stabbed her in the eyes. There was too much eye stabbing.
Yeah.
They were mercifully very quick cuts. And that's what I thought that that she was just going to use Bianca's blood because Bianca was innocent. But then when she was like, I gotta kill you, I was like, bleh.
Yeah, do you have to? Like,
and so then when I thought it was cool when I was like, oh, she's gonna set her free, and I was like, oh, that's actually kind of awesome that we're gonna have like this like sweet ending, and then it wasn't.
I mean, I think it did kind of work, and also we did get,
but that's the horror story of it all sometimes.
And then we did get one of the other girls. I don't remember if it was the ex-boyfriend's new girlfriend or the cheerleader captain. But at the very end, it was one of those two was doing a Bloody Mary in the mirror, and Bianca showed up. I loved it. And the fact that she got all the regalia, too, and like, I loved it.
There's a picture of the two of them in it on the account of Quvenzhané and Dominique.
Yeah.
So I had a great time.
Yeah, it was super great. I thought this one was, like, really excellent.
I thought, because it's one of the ones that I could see someone complaining that it wasn't scary or something, but that's sort of kind of what I liked. I liked that it was just sort of like a fantasy story.
I'm so glad you said that, because that was going to be my like entry into the thing. I don't like the super jump scary or like really, really disgusting ones. And so like this was my American Horror Story sweet spot. This is what I want.
We like dark fantasy.
I love dark fantasy.
That's like where we are. So the thing is, jump scare, I think the master is Mike Flanagan, because a well-timed jump scare is perfection.
I don't mind some jump scares. But you're right.
You can't rely, that can't be the meat of it. It has to be a flourish or an accoutrement. Like one of the great, I won't even tell you in case you haven't watched it, but one of the greatest jump scares of my entire life is an American Horror Story, or The Haunting of Hill House.
I was like,
and the way it's positioned, it's weirdly, it's a scare, but it also serves as a moment of catharsis.
Yeah.
And I've watched montages of people watching that moment.
Yeah.
And I've never seen it like, remember Rachel's feet went numb.
Oh yeah.
Like I almost vomited because I was eating
That's a lot.
And so it can be used really well, but people over rely on it thinking it's like gore or body horror or any of the things that we talk about. Like I think
you have to have a balance. Yeah.
And so yeah, I just sort of enjoy being swept away by some of these, like...
I also, just from, like, a serve it to the haters kind of place, I love that this is my favorite episode of the season so far, that it's, like, all the black girls, there's, like, it was such a simple story, it was such a well-executed story, I'm just, like, play to your strengths. You have, like, they have such a... American Horror Story and Ryan Murphy have such a deep well of like gifted actors who can like do this shit, and I'm like, can we utilize some of that a little bit more as opposed to pustule makeup? I'm just like, I don't know.
So okay, well, we'll be back next week, and hopefully we got some good news about mermaids.
I think the finale.
It's gonna
based on the titles, I think the finale is mermaids.
What is
It's called Lake.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh.
They're gonna be ugly.
Freshwater. I was like freshwater mermaids. That's an entirely different thing.
Different.
Buy Fairy Tale on Amazon.com.
There's a mermaid.
There's a freshwater mermaid in it.